changes are coming up for my life and also for this podcast. Welcome back to the Fresh Engineer podcast, where fresh engineers share their stories. I'm your host and mechanical engineer Anna Reich, and today's episode is going to be different than usual. It's going to be a season finale, if you will. There's not going to be an interview. It's just going to be me sharing some behind the scenes information, I guess. So if you're just here for the engineering content, you might want to skip this one. But if you want to get some personal insights on what it's been like to start this podcast, the lessons I learned during this first season, and what I have planned next for the show, then you better keep listening. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube and you're wondering why my bookshelf is looking so scrappy, a little bit more empty than usual, I tried to fill it with random stuff I found around the apartment, but it's just not the same. That's because changes are coming up for my life and also for this podcast, but more on that later. Let's first dive into my reflections on this first season. I have 3 main reflections that I want to share. The first one is that starting a podcast is a lot more work than I anticipated. I do have a whole behind the scenes video on my YouTube channel, so if you are curious to see exactly what the process was like, then you can check that out, and I will link it in the show notes. Basically, it was just a lot to figure out which microphones to buy, how to record with a microphone, and how to sync up the audio and the video, and then finding guests and arranging a recording time, setting everything up, preparing questions for my guests, and then editing everything, which I probably had about 16 hours of footage from this first season. So that was a lot to go through, and I'm still not done at the time that I'm recording this, but hopefully in the next few weeks I will be. But yeah, it's just been a lot of work and a lot of new things, and I thought it was going to be way easier than that. Then my second reflection is that it's a very different skill to be a podcast host than it is to run a YouTube channel and just record yourself and create videos. I didn't expect it to be so different, but it's really difficult to interview someone and have a free conversation that you know is going to be recorded. When I create my YouTube videos, I script them pretty much word for word, and then I do several takes of each scene until I'm happy with it. You can't really do that with a podcast since you have a guest sitting there, so you can't really repeat everything. The focus should be on the guest. So you really just have that one trial and need to perform well. Now, I do think that the quality of this first podcast season is pretty good considering I've never done this before. I'm quite proud of that, I will say, but I also notice a lot of things that I can improve on. One big thing is my speaking. I realize that I tend to take pauses at quite weird parts of the sentence, like in the middle of the sentence, pauses to think, which is something that I want to improve. And I'm just not that great at speaking fluently, which I can easily cover that up in my YouTube videos because I just script them, because I am good at writing, I think, but just speaking is not my strength compared to that. But I have improved that a lot. I just realized that because I was recording a YouTube video before this, and I was able to speak so much more freely than I used to. I did not have to read everything word for word. I mean, it helps also to pick a topic that you know about and something that you don't have to get right word for word, because it's just something that you already know. You didn't just learn it. You don't need to study it for the video. But yeah, I was shocked how much better it went than it used to. So I think, I'm just going to say it's a podcast that did this. Yeah, but doing this podcast has definitely motivated to work on my public speaking skills even more, and maybe also to make more solo episodes just to get even more practice, because as an interviewer, of course, my questions are still scripted. So I do not get as much practice as my guests actually do. So maybe I should just become a guest on more other podcasts, because that's something I've never done. Yeah, that could be a goal. If you have a podcast and you want me to be on, let me know and I will probably say yes. And my third reflection is that it was really cool to interview my friends, and it probably sounds silly or mean, but I just wasn't expecting it to be that interesting to interview people that I already know so much about. But I was surprised by just how much I could learn about them by interviewing them for an hour or two. And I mean, it makes sense if you think about it. You don't usually sit down with your friends and just ask them questions for an hour and interrogate them and then just ask follow-up questions and follow-up questions. You usually have like a two-sided conversation. I mean, I also don't usually talk so much about engineering or about career career path with my friends. Maybe I should. I think I should. Yeah. And I also don't usually talk so much about the past of my friends, which, I mean, it's really interesting to hear. It's fascinating to hear where someone comes from and the things they've learned so far. I mean, it's so much to discover even and learn from people that you know so well. And it also was a great excuse to reconnect with some friends that maybe I hadn't met up in a while, especially during COVID. And I just reached out to them, was like, hey, I'm starting a podcast. Do you want to be a guest? I think you have a lot to say about your career and a lot of valuable lessons to share. So would you be willing to be on? And almost everyone that I asked has said yes, which I was surprised by. I thought there was going to be maybe like 50-50, but it was probably like 95% of people said yes. Yeah, that was a big surprise as well. And so yeah, it was a great way to reconnect with some friends and reconnect in a really meaningful way as well, because most of them were also really excited to be on and also thought that it was a pleasant experience and that it was just really cool to dive so deep into these topics and into their careers. So yeah, reconnecting with friends and learning so many new things about my friends and just learning so many new things were some unexpected benefits of starting this podcast. Yeah, so those were my reflections on this season. There's probably going to be a lot more in the video where I basically vlog the whole process. I still need to produce that video, but I think it should be out by the time this episode goes live. So you might want to check that out. And then for the second part of this episode, I want to talk about what's next for this show and also personally, why are things changing, like I mentioned with the bookshelf. So I am going to be moving countries in 3 weeks from now. I'm moving to the Netherlands to try to find a job there, which is where my boyfriend lives. So that's basically how that all happened. And every time he now visits, he's been taking back some more things. So that's why now my bookshelf is getting emptier and emptier. And I was trying to just find random things that I can put in there instead so that it doesn't look super weird for this shot. And then an obvious impact on the podcast is that it's going to be recorded in a different country. So right now I'm recording in Sweden, as you might know, and then I will most likely record in the Netherlands and probably then also have more guests on that live in the Netherlands. So yeah, that will be different. But I'm also thinking that I want to do more video calls because I found that it's a lot less work actually, a lot less friction to record a video episode. So I think I can do a lot more of those, which is a big plus. And then of course I can also connect with people who are wherever. They don't have to be in the city that I'm in. And it also ties into another goal that I have, which is to interview more strangers. I mean, yeah, now I've pretty much only interviewed friends of mine, which was great for getting started because I felt a lot more comfortable interviewing them and knowing that if something goes wrong, which it did a lot of times, things went wrong with the technology. And I just knew that they would understand and I would not feel stressed about it. And it's also easier to interview someone who you already know and have a connection with, and you know that you can make jokes and yeah, and you just have some banter, you know. So that was great for the first season. And like I said, I learned a lot, but I also started this podcast with the goal of connecting with new people and learning about all different kinds of engineering careers. And really, I mean, I need to talk to new people for that, right? I'm also going to run out of friends eventually. I don't have like hundreds of friends that I can just interview, especially not engineering friends. So I'm going to have to start talking to strangers, which is going to be a whole new challenge since I am not the best at small talk. It can be a little bit awkward in first conversations when I don't know someone so well yet. But I mean, that's something I should improve on, right? Challenge myself, get out of my comfort zone. And yeah, if you want to be one of those strangers, then I'll tell you exactly what to do at the end of this episode. Yes. And another change I've been thinking of making is focusing more on a specific topic during an episode and diving deep into that rather than going through someone's entire career path. I think it was really interesting, at least for me, to follow someone's entire career path up to now and what they've done, the different steps and decisions they made. But sometimes I felt like there were topics that I really would have liked to dive a lot deeper deeper into, but there just wasn't time for that. I mean, I don't really want to make 5-hour podcast episodes. That would be a little bit much. So it would be great or like a way to do that would be to just have a dedicated podcast episode, let's say about making a big career transition or having a quarter life crisis like I might be having now, becoming a manager, starting an engineering business, going into freelancing, like different topics that come up through an engineering career that there's so much to say about and to learn about. So I might just transition to topic-based episodes or experiment with both. I'd love to hear what you think about this, and if you have any wishes for topics that I should cover or wishes for guests I should invite. And if you're still listening to this, I'm going to consider you like a super supporter of the podcast. So I really care about your input. So please let me know. Just comment under the YouTube video of this, DM me on Instagram, or send me an email, whatever you like. I would love to hear what you think. Now, with that new topic focus, I'm also thinking of reinterpreting a little bit of what the Fresh Engineer podcast stands for, with less focus on my guests being fresh engineers or new engineers in the early days of their career, and more focus on exploring topics that will help fresh engineers and also looking at engineering in a new light with a fresh perspective. So I thought to match that, I might want to change the slogan of the podcast. Not sure I will, but one idea I had was the Fresh Engineer podcast, fresh perspective on engineering careers. So that's just wanted to share that that's something I'm considering. It should hopefully still give you as much value, just maybe more varieties of value, and also value to people who are a bit further ahead in their careers than just being just out of college or even in college. Now, like I said, I want to have you on as a guest. So I am taking applications for the second season. So if you're an engineer, and honestly, I don't really care if you're an engineer, if you are someone who can provide value to engineers, or you used to be an engineer and whatever you did with your career is going to be interesting, right? So because I want to explore all the different paths you can do that are related to engineering, and also all the different things you can consider. So whether that's finances for engineers or business advice, freelancing advice, I want to bring you on. So if you feel like this could be you, then you can go to freshengineer.io/podcast/apply and answer a few questions, and then hopefully we'll talk soon. You can find the show notes for this episode on freshengineer.io/podcast/11, including links to everything I talked about. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube or Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts so you don't miss the next season, which is going to be coming up, I don't know when. And let me know in the comments of this video what your favorite episode was this season. Thanks for tuning in to the Fresh Engineer podcast, where fresh engineers share their stories. Yes! Season complete.